Hey everyone, welcome to our AU eRequesting TDG group for this week. I'd like to kick off today with an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we all gather today. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. Looking at the agenda for today, just usual business, the first 10 minutes or so. Then we're going to continue with the conversation on clinical context. I think Angus is going to continue here. If not, I can. And also look at the Diagnostic Request supporting info. So these have been going for a few meetings now. I think this is probably at least the third meeting we've talked about this. So we are going to time box that conversation. So at the most 50 minutes for both of those. So about 25 minutes for each. So we have to have other items to go through, some number of change requests and the like. So we'll see if we can get consensus. We've failed to get consensus in previous meetings on clinical context. If we're unable to get it in this meeting, then it's likely, well, it won't be part of release 1 of eRequesting and would be revisited on the backlog for future releases. So then, yeah, like I said, we've got some change requests as well, just to finalise some of the items in the IG for ballot that's coming up. So into our usual business, we have the minutes from the previous meeting and jump to that. So this was the meeting where we went through clinical context. We had a really in-depth discussion about it. Put all the detail in here, given it was a really lengthy conversation, and we did not get a consensus on a outcome. We had a motion in here which is about using the observation for clinical context. It was a split vote, 7 affirmative, 7 negative. So that motion failed. That's what we'll be coming back around, seeing if anything has changed since the last meeting. But they're the minutes there. If anyone would like to motion to approve these minutes or would like more time, I'd like, please advise.
I'd like to motion to. Yep.
Oh,
a second.
Sorry, Steph. One of us, only one of us.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay,
you can do it.
All right. I have a motion from Steph. I think Steph won that battle. So Steph has motioned. Do we have a second for the approval of these minutes? There's someone who's in the meeting would like to second.
I can second, Zoran.
Thanks, Zoran. Motion and a second. I'll launch a poll for the approval of these minutes. Approval of previous minutes. So I've launched that poll. Please vote on your preference to approve the minutes. About 67% participated. It's best if everyone does vote. If you can vote abstain if you don't have a particular vote on it, just to get the number up. I know we do have a few bots in here, so they can't vote. Okay, I'll just close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'll end that poll. And we have 13 affirmative plus 1 in the chat. So 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 9 have abstained. So that motion has passed. The minutes are approved. Okay. Now, action items from previous meetings. There's no update on the top one there, the CDG and TDG principles. That's still with the harmonisation group. Jai or Ruben, do you have any updates on the other action items?
Yeah, I can go. So in terms of the URI, I know which section of the Act we need to reference. Just trying to work out what's the best way to, I guess, reference that that particular section. So certainly happy to get some guidance around that, assuming it's the Federal Registry of Legislation that we would normally point to for an Act reference.
Yep. Okay.
So I'll pop that in the chat. It's section 45D of the My Health Records Act 2012 is the specific reference to the need to withdraw if consent has been withdrawn, or not upload a part when consent is withdrawn.
Yep. Okay. And related person, was there any update on that one?
Yeah, so we've been having some discussions about that. I think at this point I would say it's a nice to have rather than a need to have. And the reason for that is there's a lot of work that needs to happen through the development of rules following the approval of the share by default legislation. So I guess the need to track who withdrew consent will be important, but we don't have a clear enough policy as yet to, I guess, guide how the IG would need to support that. So if it's already being captured by industry, then certainly happy for it to be considered as an optional capture point, but it's certainly not a requirement at the moment because we need to work through, I guess, where we're going to land in terms of the rules and the requirements around that.
Okay. Does everyone have any comments or feedback on any of that?
So Jai, are you signaling that we're going to have to start capturing who withdrew consent?
Well, what I'm saying is that would be a consideration in terms of where we need to, I guess, explore what's required in terms of, the level of detail we want to capture through that, the uploading process or the removal, I guess, of uploading. So I'm not saying that will be definitely the case, and that's why I'm sort of suggesting we don't have enough, I guess, background at the moment to say, yes, let's put related person in and start capturing that. I think there's some more discussion that needs to happen through that process before we can be definitive in that regard. But I guess putting it to industry is, if we are in any systems capturing related person at the moment, then happy for it to go in as an optional in the IG. But I think at this stage, it's certainly not a requirement from our perspective.
Okay. So I think, yeah, we originally agreed that it wasn't in there, and this was to revise where it needed to be in there. So I'm not sure if anyone else has any opinions about it needing to be in there, but otherwise we can close this action item and it can be brought back up when needed.
Yeah, happy with that.
Okay. I think that covers those action items. And yeah, we can get that URL after you and then work through the technicalities of getting that in. Thanks, John. Okay. Getting into the core topic here again about clinical context by resource type, but eRequesting. So after the last meeting, like I said, we had a split vote. We had 7 for observation and 7 against it. After that, we set up a Confluence page to kind of refine the detail, because there was a bit of other noise in there about how supporting info was being referenced. So just created a dedicated page for that clinical context. And also we had a Zulip thread as well to discuss the content on that page and see if we could refine the requirements here. So like I said, I want to time box this. I think we want to have 25 minutes on this to see at the most, to see if we have any swayed opinions from the previous one. Otherwise, if not, I think it will drop out of R1, as we won't have time to come to a consensus, given we've already had several meetings on this, and it would defer to a future release of the requesting. Angus, are you happy to talk?
Michael, could I ask that people put their organisation on the end of their name in Zulip, because it helps with the vote to understand who's voting?
I've got this is the page that was set up. Angus, you happy to talk? Do you want to drive? Or,
sorry.
I can put the link. I will put the links in the chat.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I was talking, but
you couldn't hear you before.
Yeah, sorry. I made the comment whether people could put their names on the end of their name in Zoom, because it helps with the understanding the vote and who's voting for what organisations.
Do you want to drive, or do you want me to drive?
Probably best if you drive.
Yeah, you can still see my screen. Can you?
Yes. Okay. So try and do a short recap. We've been over this in the last 3 meetings, but again, this is we're trying to make a decision about clinical notes. This on screen is the directive we've been given by the CICD team, the clinical group. So they want something to fulfill this requirement. So a description, narrative information providing an overview of the individual's current clinical situation, occurrence, optional, single occurrence, so only once for the entire request, regardless. So even though there might be many tests, they're only really asking for the whole group of tests on the one request. Data type string, so they're only asking for a string, not anything else. Aliases, clinical notes. For most of us, at least in my career, it's typically on the printed form. There's a box and it says clinical notes or clinical details, and people write information in there. It gets heavily used in all sorts of varied ways. People write all sorts of stuff in there, but it is sort of deemed to be clinical notes or clinical details. This data element describes a broad,
Sorry, too far.
yeah, the data element describes the broader clinical background or circumstances related to the request, supporting the service provider in making informed decisions about the service delivery. Historically, many paper form feature a section called clinical notes. The document relevant background context for each service request to document relevant background context for each service request. This data element has been purposely named clinical context to semantically differentiate it from the more generic comment, which allows clinicians to record any additional information not captured in semantically specific data elements. So we have already made decisions that we wanted to put the clinical notes in an independent resource of all the other resources. So there is some properties with on service request resources to hold what is called notes. But the semantic problem we had there is that people can write possibly different notes on each test item. So let's say you've got one request, it's got 3 tests on it. They would, if they want to say, this patient's, for example, HIV positive, they'd have to say it on every test request. Full blood count, patient HIV positive, liver function test, patient HIV positive, and on and on. That causes implementer pain because then we have to, it's quite common for most of the laboratory systems, at least that we know of in Australia, tend to collate this up into one clinical note for the entire request, and then you get into a deduplication problem. We can end up with clinical notes in list systems that will say HIV positive, HIV positive, HIV positive, HIV positive, because it's been said many on each test. So decision was already made to break this away into its own resource, which allows us to deduplicate. We can just say patient HIV positive one place, and then it can be easily deduplicated. That got us to this decision, which we're struggling with, which is what is that resource? What resource are we going to put the clinical note content into? We have spent a lot of time discussing document reference resource and the observation resource. There are some other in the Zulip chats about comments about clinical impression. We could talk about that, but I think people are kind of ruling that out. If you go and read the description of it, it isn't a great match. We're happy for that to be brought up again. The other one that was mentioned just recently in Zulip was the basic resource in FHIR, which really is by name pretty basic. It does have a HTML narrative at the top and not much else as another possible option. But most of our conversation has been between these two, document reference and observation. What haven't I covered, Michael?
I think that's probably the key. I wouldn't worry about too much in the detail of proposals at the moment. I think
Yeah,
the
I
key
guess
is coming back to the
Yeah, I guess we in Zulip people were toing and froing a lot about the code to use. You know, there's a code called referral note, and there's a few other codes. So there is debate about what code should be with the resource, but as Michael has put on Zulip, and I kind of agree, that's kind of another decision. Yes, there needs to be a code. That code could probably be on any of these resources. We're trying to make the decision about the resource. So maybe we can put aside, there will be a code that indicates this is something like clinical notes or referral note, but what resource is it going into? Because regardless of the resource, the code's going to be there. So that's almost a secondary decision. What is the code we're going to use? But we're trying to make the decision of what resource are we going to use. So did you have the two proposals? Yeah.
So probably don't need to go into detail. Maybe just the advantages and disadvantages of each, and then because again, the proposal, like we said, is a secondary decision. But talking about the nuances of each one of the script.
Yeah. So document reference. You know, it's a pointer to a document. It's built to handle multiple different types of formats. So you could have a document reference to a PDF, a Word document, an RTF document, an Excel spreadsheet, almost anything, right? Here we would be pointing it to a string because that's what we're being asked to supply. And we would inline that string in the document reference. So it would not be a document reference that points to a blob of data that is the document. It would be a document reference that inline has the data of the string. And because the way document reference can support many things, that string then has to be base 64 encoded. So it just gets, so that means if you literally look at the resource as a sort of a technical implementer, you can't see the words, it's all sort of scrambled and you have to run it through a quick process, which is not difficult to turn it into the string. But because of that, it has that support for that might not be a string, it might be a Word document in the future, but that's not what we'd be planning to do today. It would be just a string, but it has that extensibility, I think, is what people like about it. If we move to observation, again, it has like a value which can be string, so you could put the clinical notes in that string. It's not base 64 encoded, it is just a string that you can see, but it is an observation, right? And then people are musing about, is this an appropriate use of observation? Putting a clinical note within an observation. I would make the comment that I thought of the other day reading the Zulip things is one plus about observation structure is the clinical note you put in the string would be searchable. So you could search for observations where value is hello world, where document reference you could not because it's base 64 encoded. But I guess I'll leave it there. We're to and throwing between these two.
I think you did mention a little bit about the conversation in Zulip. Again, there was quite a bit about the code, which I think we will come back to.
Yeah, happy for people to bring up the code. I think it's relevant in the discussion about which resource to pick, but I don't know if we need to get too bogged down in what the code is. We need a code, and whether it's document reference or observation, that code goes into the category of the document or into the code element of the observation.
Sorry, we do have a few hands up. Tawinda?
Yep.
Just want to line my understanding here. What we are trying to do is we want to create a resource for the nodes section and want to link it with service request, all the service requests at the test level.
Correct. All the service requests would point to this one note resource. Yeah.
But isn't this something that can go at the group level or order level under the nodes, service request or nodes?
that is the intent. It is going at the group level by being an independent resource. We do not have a group service request. We have a group task, but we wouldn't deem that the clinical note should go on the task. Maybe tell into your,
This is
because
one
I think you have
of
a
the-
group service request in your implementation, don't you?
Yeah, so few of the use cases where you want things to be at the common level across all the orders, all the tests.
Yeah,
So
so
we've
we had a vote on 27th of March for this, and the agreement was that common information would be managed in separate resources, and that there wasn't a group.
Yeah, so we currently do not have a group service request concept at Spark, Tailwinder. Sorry, Thomas. Yep.
Thank you. I just wondered, perhaps, Angus, if you could outline what your perceptions are on the pros and cons of basic as well, because I feel like if we can't decide on anything else, then maybe that's a good fallback option. That's why I brought it up in the resort.
Yeah. So my immediate reaction to basic is where does the clinical note string go? Like, and I imagine you're thinking in the narrative part. Then it becomes HTML. So it's now not a string per se, it is HTML. That was my first knee-jerk reaction to it.
My impression from the way it's documented, I haven't gone and investigated other uses of it, but my impression is that you kind of just extend it with whatever fields you need to extend it with fields or text value.
So it's very hard to hear with the background. Someone's got some background noise going. Maybe it is Thomas. Sorry, could you repeat that, Thomas? It was very hard to hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in an awkward situation. My impression from the documentation is that they anticipate you just extend it with whatever field you need. And so I imagine it would just acquire a field called text value or something like that. And the advantages that they detail in the sort of explanation of basic, as opposed to having a completely new resource, is that at least when you go looking for basics, you find some documentation of what it is and what it's kind of meant for. And they specifically say when there's a need to convey a narrative-only construct that doesn't neatly correspond to one of the other resources, which I feel is exactly what we're talking about.
Yep. Okay, so I get that. So you're proposing that we could add an extension to the basic resource to hold the string.
Precisely, and if that later evolves into, you know, something that turns out to actually be a really useful resource called, you know, ad hoc note or something, then so be it in future. But for now, it's just saying we need a field on a resource. We can't find a resource that we're comfortable with for that, and so we will extend basic to hold that field.
Yep, understand that concept. So I look, for me, I'm still feeling, you know, basics like last resort. It's a bit like Z segments in HL7. You know, we're going to use this for basic, and then everyone else who, whatever their, you know, whatever other item, you know, it's kind of like the end of the line place to put it. You know, is it
Absolutely.
Is it so bad to put it in observation that we're going to resort to putting it in basic? In my mind, is kind of what I'm thinking.
I mean, we're also anticipating we perhaps weren't included in this release at this point, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. So look, I'll do any, David McKillop, you get hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking that document reference might be a good catch-all for things that as we develop, but as the industry as eRequesting progresses, there will be probably other call for developing specific observations. Like there's a bunch of observations in there in AU Core now, which like body height and heart rate and smoking status, that are specific observations, and you might be developing things for LMP and things like that. That's which currently might go in a general clinical note, but they might become specific enough or common enough that there might be a specific observation for. And I just think that might be an option.
Yeah, I don't think the decision we're making here rules out the use of observation for other things. I mean, we've already modeled pregnancy status, that like we're already modeling other things to go in observation. So you might say that clinical note synergizes with that if we used observation, but this area of supporting information can hold any other resource, any resource, right? So I don't think the decision we make on clinical notes predicates the decision on any other clinical information that we want to provide atomically, right? So if we want to provide the patient's height as an observation, if we choose document reference to provide clinical notes, doesn't rule out that in the future we can use observation to record the patient's height.
No, I think the observations would be, if they're available, would be a better spot, but it's just whether people will want to go to, try and fill things out, try and separate stuff out, but that's.
I'm sorry, I can just clarify. I did talk to CDG about this well, and this intent for clinical context is just for free text, the clinical notes, right? And in their backlog, there is other structured data that will be coming in, and it wouldn't be represented in here. As we identify that structured data, it will be pulled out, it will be put in other resources to model that structured data, even to the level of they mentioned if there was an image and they wanted an image, well, that would be a different resource. This is just for the text notes, unstructured text notes.
Thomas again?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose my objection to being observation and why I would much prefer either document reference or basic, and I don't really have much of an opinion between the two, is that very frequently, and by the way, I'm able to test this, very frequently the content of this is not going to be like a true thing about the patient. It will be a hypothesis or a question or a impression, or like a request to do the test in a certain way. Like, could you please take a view from the side while you're doing this X-ray, for example? And none of those things are like the true facts about the patient, basically. And therefore, that's why I feel they don't fit what observation is meant to convey. I mean, maybe the impression bit kind of does, like there's not untrue to say, well, my impression about the patient to say was this. But I think like instructions to the test, the person who's performing the test, are not observations about the patient. And that's sort of where my core objection lies.
So my point to that is that the code we use, and I don't want to go back into the code conversation, but the code is telling you what the content is, right? So if the code is something like referral note, and you said, then that precludes whatever that data is, right? If that data, it says take from the side, and it's a referral note for a diagnostic imaging referral, then that kind of makes sense, like it, in my mind. But if the code said height, and you wrote, take from the left, then that would not make sense. But because the code says height, right? But if the code says referral note, then it's kind of like, this is a referral note. So if it says take from the side or patient, patient's scared of needles, then that kind of makes sense to me, doesn't it?
What is the advantage of putting it in a resource called observation then? Like, isn't the whole point of calling it observation semantic?
They had to call the observation resource something. We commonly have used observation in a very generic way. I pointed out the other day that what do we put a diagnostic report text in? We put that in observation. What do we put the macroscopic description in histology in an observation? And I suppose you could argue they are observations in the pure definition of observation.
Yeah, I would.
It gives you searchability. I don't know if we need to be able to search on the clinical notes, find all the orders where the doctor said something is an advantage of observation. I'm not as wedded to the notion that an observation is as strongly connected to. In my history, it's used in a far more general way. David?
Yeah, I guess from my experience working in other standards, it goes back to the things I think I've said before about the event, right? And the language that we're using. So in the standard languages, when you do recognize you're using a word that's describing an event, all the things that are interesting or that are applicable to the timing of that event tend to be attached as other objects or resources in them, in the message itself or in the structure. So I know it's tricky with observation because I know that's right. So I did an observation and I collected 2 measurements, right? I had an observation and, oh, I wrote something down. And so I guess that's one side of it. But going back to the thing about what to do with basic and your note, I think that's a great idea to park it there because it's pretty, like you say, then it's there once, right? And it's versatile. It sounds like that's what it's meant to be used for when you want to have something to reflect the entire payload. So anyway, that's what I was thinking.
Michael, is it worth bringing up the description of observation from just the base fire spec and maybe the description of document reference?
Yep, I was just getting it. So this is observation.
Yep.
And what was this? What document reference?
So there's a list there, for example, uses of observation resources include vital signs such as body weight, pressure, and temperature.
The first sentence of 10.1.2 is pretty good. So if you go down.
10.1.2, okay.
Yeah.
Boundaries. Very long, Brett.
No, just the first 2 sentences.
So actually, the third sentence is third or fourth sentence is the most illustrative. It is not intended. Sorry, the observation is intended for capturing measurements and subjective point-in-time assessments.
Does also say any type of information
desired. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perception measurement is not.
Doesn't say what it's not for.
Just says, however, that is not its intent after the sentence that says you can capture anything you like.
Yeah. But it's saying if there's another resource type that's suitable, use that. Right. That's kind of what it's saying.
It's subjective point-in-time assessments. See, I think the key thing is it's not intended to be used for those specific contexts and use cases already covered by other fire resources. You know,
Exactly.
I think that's what they're trying to get across is they're trying to say it's very general in use, but don't just chuck everything here if there's a better place in fire for it.
Don't use it for everything.
Maybe document reference. Yes.
Belinda? Can't hear you if you're talking.
I'm sorry. I've seen people using composition resource for progress notes. And it's written in the description as well of the compositions, saying things like progress notes and clinical notes can go inside where composition section dot text is a field to be populated with the human readable stuff.
Can composition live alone? Isn't composition meant to be part of a fire document in a bundle? I could be wrong.
Not always.
Yeah, it doesn't need to.
It's what is it composing if it stands alone?
Seems like overkill to me.
I'd say a composition containing a consultation notes, a progress notes, a report or a letter, investigation report, a prescription form, So all these informations can be consisted inside.
Actually, it does say, however, a composition alone does not constitute a document. So it can be used separately.
I might just jump back to the Mozilla. There was another point in here from Heather from the CDG. Just one point in here is about, in addition, the AU-CDI roadmap includes suggestions for further data elements that have been placed on the backlog for now. Most notably, these include structured reason for request. To state a distinct data element captures specific clinical reason for the service requested. In the case of diagnostic testing, the requester wants answered. For example, exclude ectopic pregnancy or rib. So some of that stuff that Thomas was mentioned. So the AU-CDI is looking at other types of narrative text that would be put in different resources or different elements to contain some of this information, and noting that the clinical context, what its intent for is the background to the request. For example, 24-year-old female presenting with 4 hours of lower abdominal pain and positive urine. And then potentially there'll be other elements, other resources that would contain other types of notes or information around that as well. And I was just going to, in that context, we'll just go to service request. In the service request itself, there is, if you have a look under, let's find that reason for request.
Reason code, it's down the bottom.
Down the bottom, is it? Reason code. Okay.
Oh, I'm looking at base. Oh, what are you looking at?
Yeah, reason. Oh, here we go. We've got, for example, reason here, reason or indication for requesting the service, and it's a codable reference, and then it can reference a condition, an observation, a diagnostic report, a document reference. Just saying that there's other sort of, we would apply this pattern in the future for others that come up over time. And that might be the case there for reason.
Can I just make a procedural suggestion, because I imagine we're getting pretty close to time, that perhaps it would be useful for everyone if you just individually polls how many people would find it acceptable to use each of observation, document reference, and basic, and that might inform what proposal is possible.
I can see if I can do a poll on that. So let me see polls.
So I would poll each one individually, because people might think that more than one is acceptable.
You can probably, if I do it properly, you can
more than one.
Do more than one. And if I can do it on the fly. Okay, so let's see what I can do very quickly. And multiple choice, rank. Multiple choice. Okay, so what are we looking at? Document reference, observation, basic, and
composition.
Yeah. Something else. All right. Don't worry about the order in this. I'll see.
Can we say to people that the something else? Did you put something else in, like other?
Yeah.
That other needs to be something you have in mind, not just none of these.
Okay. Let me see if that works. Okay. Can you see a poll? because yeah, we are pretty much at time now. So I think we'll look at the outcome of this poll, see if someone wants to make a motion on just the resource type, not the details of how we do it, and then move on. I'll give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And poll, share the results. So we've got 72% for document reference, 48% for observation, 28%. And that doesn't work. Since that work. Oh, because you can select more than one. So yes, 28% for basic.
They're not percentages.
Something else and composition 16%.
I'd be happy to make a motion on the basis of the document reference.
Okay, well, thanks, Thomas. We have a motion to use the document reference resource type for clinical context. Is anyone interested in seconding that?
I can second. This is Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb. Are there any other comments or questions before we hold the vote on that?
Did the something else people, did someone want to pipe out what they thought that something else is? Or does that just not, none of these others?
There's only one person, so
yeah, that's fine.
So any other comments or questions before I launch the poll for the motion for document reference? No. All right, I will try and launch. So this is the poll to accept document reference as the resource type for clinical context in eRequesting. I'll give it 80% participation, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'll end that poll. So we do have a majority this time. We have 23 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so that's 24 affirmative. We have 3 negative and we have 6 abstained. So we have a passed motion.
Well, those poor implementers in the future are going to have to look at base 64 all their life.
So obviously that's a decision for the moment. This is to go in at least one for the ballot. So it will be open to ballot. But it's good. We've actually made a decision. Now there was a draft proposal. Actually, let's jump back to my other screen. Too many windows. Not this one. Not those. What was this one? So there was a draft proposal in this page as well for the use of document reference, which we've made the decision on the first one, which is a document reference as preferred file resource to represent clinical context. The detail in here, sorry, zoom in, was that we would use referral note. Let's come back to that, but it would be subject would be mandatory and use AU call patient. The content attachment will be mandatory. The content attachment content type shall be mandatory and constrained to text plain for clinical context. And the data shall be mandatory, ensure data is provided inline basics for and not a reference document. And then we'd have the must support default obligations and the like. So we do have that. So we'll just keep that in mind for a moment. We may need to have a quick discussion about coding. And I do have a slide for that if I can. I wasn't sure where we were going to end up here. So see these in the Zoom chat. There was a few brought up. referral note was what we were looking at originally. There was a comment made that that's currently used in My Health Record already, and may not be appropriate given that. There were some others about requested imaging studies, but there wasn't an equivalent for pathology, reason for study, and summary note. So I've got a bit of summary here. Thomas?
Just in relation to what the sort of alternative is, I noticed there was some, I think it was mentioned that we could just, extend with a custom code for this particular purpose.
Yeah, local code. Yeah.
This is where we need a
So that's full on other at the bottom there would be we create a local code, I think is yes, a valid option. Is there any I'd be interested if anyone from the agencies here about the use of referral note, whether that would be not appropriate given its usage in My Health Record, or if there's any concerns there. That was what we previously identified would be appropriate.
I'm from the agency, but I wouldn't be a good spokesperson on actual use of the terminology on this as far as referral, clashing with referral note. I could take it on notice and get back.
My only comment on referral note would be that it may not technically be the case that it's always sent to a consultant where, like, sure, pathology companies have pathologists who technically are the people who receive and fill the request. Radiology companies have radiologists who do the same. But, I can imagine that you might actually at some point, the person who's really addressed to might be the diagnostic imaging technician, might be the clinical scientist, and as this is expanded, might be the person who does pulmonary function testing, etc. So it might not age well.
Yeah, I think one thing to note is it will be in the context of the service request. So it's tightly bound to the service request itself. But I'll just go back to Heath's comment here. He was saying that he didn't think referral note was appropriate to use to code clinical referrals such as used in ADHA service referral CDA. So it's a service referral used in My Health Record.
I don't even think reason for study is correct there either, because it's more generic than that.
Yes, that's right. And I think that was going to be my point on that as well, is we may actually use that for when we are looking at that reason when it comes in the future. It is designed to be more generic than the reason and have information that's not just the reason. So, and there's no description on summary note. Summary note in like is, we have a look at that.
We don't have you've got the requesting for imaging, but you don't have the pathology akin to. So
summary note. I mean, summary note might be a good catch-all. There's no description on it, but
can you make up a NICTIS code that's suitable? If you haven't, if you're not happy with the LOINC options.
Yeah, which is yes, we have another code. So we've got, if we can't, I do want to move on. So we do have some options here. We can, if I get to the right window, So there is a draft proposal here which has referral note in it. We can change that to something else. We can leave that off and say we want to create it with this, and we will determine the code and a subsequent decision. Open to the TDG for how we proceed, whether we want to come back after having worked out an appropriate code, or move forward with a proposal now on any of this.
I propose that we accept this without the code, without the type. So we knock off everything else. We're left with the code problem.
I'd second that.
Okay, so that was the motion to accept this motion as is without document reference type.
Or for it to be later decided.
Yeah, so we will decide that separately, but we'll accept the others. And Thomas, you're happy to second that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I will. Any other questions or comments on that? No. I'll launch a poll for the. Oh, I might be still sharing. Relaunch poll. So this is to accept the document reference proposal there without document reference type. Okay, I'll end that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so we have 21 affirmative plus 1 in the chat. So 22 affirmative, we have 1 negative, and we have 4 abstain. So that motion has passed as well. Right. Thanks, everyone. It's been a tough slog, but we have made some decisions, which is great. I think to continue this chat about coding, I will post something in Zulip to continue the conversation on this, to focus in the Zulip chat now about the coding. So certainly if there's any representatives from the agency that can take that on notice as well and provide any contribution to that as well, that would be helpful.
Will do.
Options for implementing supporting info. So now this is, we have made a decision on what our common supporting info is. We already had one as well. We already had pregnancy status. We now have added clinical context to that. There may be others in the future. And this comes back to that decision that we'd made on 27th March about if there's a need to intend to specify common administrative or clinical information across the group of service requests, that should be represented with the supporting information attribute commonly referenced via resource. So referencing these from supporting info. These are the things that in AU eRequesting data requirements had been identified that might fit that criteria for supporting info. We've got clinical context, which we just decided was document reference, problem diagnostic summary, adverse reaction risk summary, and then other supporting info. This is the to be defined in future AU eRequesting releases. So this would be an expanding list of things of data that would be attached to the service request through supporting info.
And it's open to allow customization at the what's the word, outside the spec. Like
that's right. So it's open. I think the way we do it in the spec is we use must support. So things that we add in specifically for AU eRequesting, we put a must support on there saying you must support, but that doesn't constrain you from doing other things, extending it further for your own use cases and providing additional information. But it just means that it's not a must support in AU eRequesting, but it doesn't constrain you from taking this and using it for other things as well. So there's 2 different approaches to this. One is the use of multiple slices on supporting info. Discrete supporting info slice for each supporting information resource. Another option is a document bundle, which is one supporting info slice for all supporting info contained within a document bundle. So there is a discussion page that's been up for a while now on this. I'll just put it in the chat as well. Just talk through all of this. So this one's been around for a while now as well. We just kind of haven't got to the decision on it. This is the multiple slice approach. So we would have named slices on the service request in supporting info. We already have one right now, which is pregnancy status. So that's in the spec right now. And we have supporting info pregnancy status, which references an IPS pregnancy status observation. So we can also do that with clinical context. We can have a named slice called clinical context, which will point to our document reference. If we want to do adverse reaction risk summary, we can add a name slice there that would reference an AU core allergy intolerance, or problem diagnostic summary, you could reference that. So this would be the pattern. As we come up with more supporting info, we would add another slice, and we just keep adding name slices to this as requirements expand. The other option is to reference a document bundle, and then this document bundle has a composition and then has the other resources contained within that document. So clinical context, IPS, allergy intolerance, AE core condition, whatever else. And so therefore each time we add something new, we add it into the document bundle. So it kind of simplifies the reference from service request to a single document, but then that document has a whole heap of things in it. There was a comparison done on this just as a general guide to sort of provoke conversation. The multiple slices is a simpler data structure. The one slice with a document bundle, it's a more complex data structure within the document bundle. They're both extensible, so as new things come up, we just follow the pattern, add more things in. The query efficiency, so potentially if you're using multiple slices, you would need to do multiple queries or includes to retrieve all the supporting info. I don't know whether that's a pro or a con, because maybe you only want specific information, you only want to get that, you don't want to get everything. So it's potentially a pro as well as a con. And then the other one with a document bundle, you can get everything in a single query by getting the document bundle. The maintenance overhead, well, one, you're updating the diagnostic request or the service request whenever you want to add anything new. The other one, you're updating the document bundle. So something needs to be updated if we come up with a new resource we want to add in supporting info, but it's whether we update the service request or the document bundle. So they're probably equal there. Then Thomas, yeah.
What are the implications for if we, for example, want to be able to reference multiple conditions in either option?
So that comes up in one of these. I think it's the last one. So I'll get to that. And the other one was in supporting info structure. So it's a flat list of supporting info references. The other one supports the use of composition, which provides a structured and organized representation of the supporting info. I don't know if we have a requirement for that, but if we do, it gives you the ability to structure it in an organized way. They both align with existing patterns. Slicing is used regularly. Document bundle is a similar approach to how IPS models a document. And the granularity and flexibility. So this is that point, Thomas, I think, is about using multiple slices allows for fine-grained control by enabling different pieces of supporting information to be applied selectively to individual diagnostic requests within the group. Each request can reference its own relevant supporting info. So they can all reference the same slice, the same resources from the slices, or they can mix and match depending on the needs of the individual requests. The other one is more of an all or nothing. If you've got a document bundle with all the supporting info in it, they all have to reference the same one, or you need to create multiple document bundles with different pieces of information, and some of that might be duplicated, some of it might not.
I don't think that does actually answer my question. My question was about, let's say, inside one of those slices, or I think inside the document bundle it's pretty obvious. You can have as many, conditions as you want, as many feature resources you want, but in each of those slices, like one to many, or are they just one?
We have control over the cardinality. So I think they are by default. Let me just
0 to many.
have a look. They're 0 to many by default.
Yep.
So if we have a look at
So we've chosen to constrain the pregnancy status slice to 0 to 1, but I don't think we would be doing that for the adverse reaction risk summary or problem diagnosis summary.
Or the clinical note.
All clinical notes. Yep.
Here we go. So so the default for supporting info is 0 to many, reference anything. We've done a slice for pregnancy status and said that's 0 to 1, but we have control over what we do with that. How many? But each slice can be managed separately. So we could make a slice mandatory too if we said something had to be provided.
To me, that last point is, I find, for me is the reason I'd go for multiple slices, because if I want to say something about one of the tests, I now have to create. Well, I'm not sure how you do it. You put it in the document bundle, and the doctor has to say, in relation to the hepatitis test, I'm testing for immunization. You know, like he has to now kind of preference what test are you talking about?
It sounds like you could make like a separate bundle for each test, which has references to the parts that you want to include for that. So in some ways it's equivalent, it's just more resources rather than slices. If you want to differentiate between that, if the doctor, if she wants to assign some things against an, like it's possible either way, but it might be more data over the line to do it,
But that's not what they're proposing here, because they're proposing one document.
No, it would. Sorry, yes. I mean, we've put cardinality on this, so it's up to us whether we support one supporting info document bundle or many to do that. So I think we do have the flexibility to do that.
You could have many document bundles. Yeah.
It does potentially undo some of the advantages of using document bundle because it's more complex to provide that flexibility.
Oh, sorry. What I mean is that let's say you've got multiple requests. You could have a different document bundle for each request, which could reference mostly the same stuff, but exclude one particular item or include one additional item that's not in the other document bundles. Am I correct in that understanding?
Oh, sorry.
I thought a document bundle was meant to be immutable and not reference other resources contained in other document bundles. My understanding.
Are you saying, Thomas, that you'd have different service requests, different orders, basically, and have each of the orders reference a different document bundle?
Well, if you've got a resource and you've got a certain set of slices on there, and you've got another resource with a slightly different set of slices, then you could also have one resource that has a document bundle that contains a certain set of content, and another resource that has a document bundle that has a slightly different set of content in it. So I feel like you retain the flexibility, unless I'm misunderstanding how these references work.
Yeah, I think that's. Let's just jump to.
I feel like
that's the concept here. I mean, whether this is clinical context or a document bundle is the same thing. Is that they can all reference the same or they can reference different. I think is the. But if it's a document bundle, then you need a document bundle for each one that's different.
So potentially in the maximal case, let's say there's 3 tests being ordered, you could have a document bundle for the clinical comment about the entire request, and then a document bundle for the first test, another document bundle for the second test, and another document bundle for the third test. So you've got 4 document bundles for the entire request. 3 are specific to tests. 1 is global for the whole request, is the maximal thing you could have.
Or would you rather simply just have 3 document bundles, 1 for each test, and include whatever's common between them in all 3 document bundles?
Then
do document bundles reference, or do they actually contain the resource?
So two things there.
Confused.
So 2 things there. First of all, if you put the same content in each, we're back to the deduplication problem. Like, so now the receiver's like, you've said HIV positive in all 3 documents, and I can't tell that, so I'm just going to have to repeat it 3 times to everyone. There's that problem. And then I was under the impression that a fire document bundle is immutable. So let's say you had a condition of I don't know, HIV positive, and you wanted to put that in each of the document bundles, you'd have to have 3 separate conditions, because you can't have 3 document bundles all referencing the same resource, because now if someone edits one document and edits that condition, it edits it in the other documents.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Thomas, now.
Yeah, you're on mute, Thomas.
Sorry. I suppose that's what I think would be intended. If the patient has a condition and the condition is relevant to two of the tests, then the same condition can be referenced in both places.
Yeah, but I understand that from a semantic point of view, but this is a bit like me opening up a Word document, editing a section, and then that edited the section in 5 other Word documents because those Word documents also reference the same section. And that's kind of the point of a document, is it's a mutable blob, right? It doesn't just dynamically change because someone changed something somewhere else. Where when you're outside of a document paradigm, that is what happens.
So the structure here in the document bundle is the bundle has a number of resources, which here, this entry resource references the resources in the bundle. And then there's a composition which has sections, which says the first section is a clinical context, second section is pregnancy, and structures it into a document, a structured document. So yeah, I think the intent there wouldn't be that you couldn't have a clinical context that is common and shared by 3 different document bundles. It has to be in a document bundle for each one.
It needs to be repeated in each one.
Yeah.
Independently. Whereas if we go the other way, you're not having a document bundle. You're not trying to go down document paradigm, and you can have the same clinical context referenced by each one of them.
Each one can reference the same or different, depending on the need.
And
Okay.
you could have 2 so sort of crossing with our previous decision, you can have 2 clinical context. Clinical context is going to be 0 to star, isn't it? Like you could have 10 clinical contexts on one test if you wanted to.
I don't think we've got to cardinality yet, but yes, you could, if that's what we decide. David?
So even with the slices, if you have one diagnostic request and you have a clinical context, are you still going to have the problem where you're going to have HIV positive in all different requests that you have, and you have to decipher that?
The idea is that you would reference the same one. If it's the same, you reference the same one. So each diagnostic request, this comes back to our model here.
Right.
Each diagnostic request would reference the same one. But if there is something different, it can reference a different one, right? It gives you the flexibility to do either. So they're all the same, all reference the same clinical context. One's different, it's going to reference a different clinical context. And so therefore, when you're processing this, if they reference something different, well, I know this one's different because it's not the same one. That would be the intent.
Okay.
And the intent, I see as the receiver, if you're going to write the same thing in separate resources, then I'm going to duplicate that on my side. Like if you just create one clinical content, say HIV positive, and reference it from all the service requests, then I'm just going to say it once because that's what you intended. But if you have a clinical context referenced by separate clinical context referenced by each service request, then I'm going to show that multiple times for each service request, right? So if you say HIV positive in the clinical context and they all reference it, and then for the test A, you had a separate clinical context, I'm gonna show that separately, right? That's another one. I worry document reference here becomes you got multiple documents across the request. You got the global one, you're going to have possibly one per test. I suppose it works. Anyway.
Does anyone have a preferred option? Do we want to try and make a decision on picking one of these now? Given now we've got clinical context, we need to know how we're going to implement it. And we need the approach. So this would be the approach we apply. We have already put pregnancy status in there, but this is the second piece of supporting info we're adding in. So we kind of need to pick our approach so we know how we do it, and then we would follow this pattern further forward.
I'm certainly in favour of the slicing approach rather than the document approach.
Could you do a poll like you did before?
Yeah,
Just say
I
between
think
just
I've
two
seen
things
that
and
in the
see how
chat.
if it's polar, we're all good to go. If it's
Yeah, it's
even
a good
Stevens,
idea. Except I have to create them on the fly, which is fun.
you're the man.
So this will be a poll, not a vote. Choice one. Slices.
One of the major constraints with the supporting info is we don't have any search parameter for it. Like I don't see any use case, but in future, if we would like to search a service request based on the supporting infos, we can't do that. But there can be a way like going to particular resource, search that resource, and then search the service request. On other side of bundle, a composition do give us a provision to search based on section codes. So if you have a code, you can search section, particular composition based on this code. Positive, negatives for both.
The change
so
in R5.
I just lost my poll. Hang on, I'll start doing it quickly.
No, it hasn't changed in R5. Still not searchable. Good point, Tailwinder.
Okay, it's an untitled poll. Supporting info, multiple slices on document bundle. Might just give that another few seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think it's a clear winner. Multiple slices. We had 14 for multiple slices and 3 for a document bundle. Is someone interested in making a motion to?
I'll motion that we use multiple slices for service requests.
I can second that, Dave McKillop.
Poll for me to launch. So vote for the motion. Poll. So this is a vote for using multiple slices as the preferred option for supporting info. I'll give that another running on time, so I'll give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that poll. A couple more jumped in. I'll end that poll now. So we have 19 plus 1 in the chat, so 20 affirmative. We have 1 negative and we have 4 abstain. So that motion has passed. Okay, making some progress. I think looking at that's that motion. Okay, so now we've got the approach, and do we want to apply this approach to clinical context? So this is just a draft. We don't have to use this at all. It's just a prompt. But we add clinical context to supporting info and AU eRequesting Diagnostic Request using the preferred supporting info approach, which is multiple slices. It would be a supporting info slice on Diagnostic Request, which is must support cardinality. Well, we can change that to 0 to 1, but we can change it to 0 many with default obligations. I think, Angus, you've raised the point that it could be many, and that's probably valid.
I think it has to be one. I think it has to be 0 star, because you're gonna have where you say something like HIV positive for the whole request, and then you're going to say on this test, I want to say something specific about this test. That doesn't.
And there's probably no need to constrain it at this point, right?
No,
Let's just see how it gets used.
Yeah, that doesn't stop people putting it in the group one. They might say, oh, in regard to the hepatitis test, blah blah blah. They can do that, but you can also just put it granular at the test level.
Does someone want to make a motion along these lines or something else?
I'll make a motion to accept what's on screen with the modification that cardinality is 0 star.
Okay.
Oh, I can second that, Dave McKillop.
That's David. I'll launch another poll. Okay, you should see another poll now. So this is to accept the proposal on screen with the change of cardinality from 0 to many. Give that 5 seconds. We go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we have 25 affirmative plus 1 in the chat. So 26 affirmative, 0 negative, and 2 abstain. So that motion has passed. Great job. All right. So we've gone over time, but it's for what I wanted for those, but it was 100% worthwhile. Sorry, Tawinder. Did you have a question?
Just to note, every slice that we are adding supporting info, we need a search parameter for it to retrieve along with the query. We can't fetch the resource.
Okay.
But granted, that's. Do we need it? Do we need it? Have we got?
So how the resource will come in the query when you are polling it, you will just get the reference of the resource in the service request.
I see what you're saying. Is when you do the big query to drag in everything, you won't get the supporting information. You'll have to go get it with separate queries.
Or separate, or within the same query, even you need to put a include and rev include,
well,
and that will give you another problem. Like for example, you have 3 service requests, you will get 3 clinical contexts in retrieval. So keeping that at a common level will give you the concerns with retrieval.
But why will you get 3? I don't understand that.
Like the way we are polling the order presently, we are polling all the service requests for a given task, right? And you have to do a include or rev include over the service request. And if you have 3 service requests, it will give you 3 clinical contexts in retrieval, not 1.
You mean 3 of the same instance?
Yes.
Is that your experience with Happy Server? That seems odd.
Yeah, surely you will get 3 records out because you are querying over 3 resources of the service request.
But
no, you'll get the same. It doesn't duplicate them. If it's actually the same instance of the resource, you just get one copy.
That was my experience too.
I need to check that.
But Tawinder, if you do have an issue you want to add to this, just raise a Jira issue and let myself or another co-chair know, and we can get it on the agenda for another meeting. So just definitely raise an issue if you've got something you want to add to this.
Yeah, it does require search parameters, so that's something we need to add for all the supporting infos.
Not necessarily. I can see the advantage of having, but it's not mandatory. You must have it. You can make a second query. It is a second query, but it's debatable.
No, I mean how I will retrieve it. Like if the filler system is retrieving it, how they will get it.
I'll make a second query. So I get the entire request, and as I process it and realize there's supporting information, I make a query to get it.
Okay. That depends. We need to discuss on that. Like, how is
I agree.
everyone want to do the way?
I 100% agree. I'm not saying that I am the voice on this. There will be others with your opinion as well. I agree.
Thank you.
But yeah, definitely that kind of ties into next. So we did have a number of change requests to go through today. We might go through the last one because it's a small one. These were sent out with the minutes from the last meeting as well. I'll send them out again before the next meeting, as plus any others that we've got. The top two ones are too much to go through today. I think we may do the last one, but just on this note about we only have a couple of meetings left before we go to ballot. We want changes that need to go into eRequesting now, not when we go to ballot, right? So if we've got things that are missing, that are needed, that are wrong, now's the time to raise them. So at the bottom of the IG page, on every page of the IG, there is a propose a change link there. So if you click that, it will launch into the HL7 Jira. You can raise a change request. So you can raise a change request on anything. Just note the specification is AU eRequesting. You do need a HL7 Confluence account, but you can get the correctos free. Raise your issues. We want these issues, raise them, contact a co-chair, contact myself, one of the other co-chairs, and ask for it to be put on the agenda of one of the next two meetings so that we can get these things in. So everyone's welcome to do that. We would much rather have them now than when we get to ballot and have to deal with all these things once we're in ballot. The best thing is to get as refined as possible now. So please raise changes, let us know. We'll get them on the agenda for a meeting.
Whilst we're out of time now, Michael, do we need to raise Tailwinder's search parameter 1, or are we just going to?
Well, I think I would love Tailwinder to raise it if he's got it there, or we can look at it. I mean, we can discuss that as co-chairs as well. But I do just want one here, if we can get it through quickly, because it is holding up a previous change that we're trying to implement. Steph, I don't know did you want to talk to this quickly?
Yep. So this change request applies to the AU eRequesting communication request patient profile, which is used to represent a request for communication from a filler to a patient, for example, for, an SMS or email reminder or instructions relating to their diagnostic test. So have we got the
Oh, sorry, I'm
Jira
sharing
ticket?
my screen.
Yep.
Sorry, I thought I was sharing it.
Yep, cool. Thanks. So these are the proposed changes that we need to make to the profile. So on communication request.subject, change the cardinality, constrained cardinality to 1.1. Make it must support. It would reference an AU core patient, and we would apply the default obligations regarding must support and the actor conformance requirements. So this constraint on communication request.subject seems like it was unintentionally missed from the original proposal and mock-up of the IG. So it didn't make it into the agreed resolution, but it is required for a communication request for a patient. So this correction would ensure alignment with the intended use of the profile. And I'd like to make a motion that we accept this change.
I'll just note that we had subject on all the other communication requests we approved. Just the proposal for this one somehow missed it. It was an oversight as opposed to a major change we're proposing here. So, sorry, Steph, you motioned to accept this change. Is anyone interested in seconding that motion?
This is Chris. I can second that.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any other comments or questions on that before I launch a vote? It is just really an administrative fix for us. I will launch a relaunch poll. So this poll is to accept the motion to update the patient communication request with those constraints on subject shown. We've got about 8% now, so I'll end that poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End that poll. So we have 22 affirmative plus 1 in the chat. So 23 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thanks, Steph. So these other ones, I'll very quickly, in the minute we've got here, just talk to them. We won't vote on these today. Just have a look at them in your own time, raising the issues you may have with them. But we've got missing must support obligations. This is again is kind of just a fix for things we previously decided. So several elements have been profiled in eRequesting are missing must support flags and observations. So the eRequesting task is missing a must support on task.meta and task.meta.tag. So, and it doesn't have any obligations. So we're proposing to add those. On coverage, we created the eRequesting coverage resource to contain the type, but it was optional. So this would be to modify it to make it mandatory and add the default obligations. So we won't vote on that one today. The other one was we need a security page on the IG. So the eRequesting Fire IG doesn't have currently a security and privacy page, and it's a required section for HS7AE fire implementation guides. So there's a proposal here to provide some general guidance about security. Basically that it's really a reasonable motherhood statement saying that eRequesting implementers need to be aware that security and privacy is essential. Release 1 does not include any specific security and privacy requirements and focuses on establishing the foundation data model and RESTful API interactions. Specific security and privacy requirements may be developed in future releases, and implementers are responsible for applying appropriate security and privacy with general requirements provided in the AU core security. So we'll go through those in the next meeting, just noting that they're there, have a look, think of any comments you may have on those. Like I said before, please raise any issues you have on the IG. We want to see them now. Let us know so we can address them in the next couple of meetings. And for that, we have 2 more meetings where we can make major changes. So not many. Then we have the testing event Spark testing event we're holding in Brisbane, which gives us the opportunity to test all the things that we've been putting into the IG. Following meeting after that test event, we are going to get any feedback from testing and look at our fire maturity model 1 review. So that's where we've got to move all our resources from a level 0 draft to a level 1. And we need to have done that prior to ballot. We can't take any draft artifacts to ballot. So we need to review them for errors, accept that they are fit for purpose. And so that will be the focus of that meeting on the 3rd of July. Then we have a last meeting to make any minor changes, informative guidance changes. And then the last meeting before ballot publishes is just a ballot process meeting and a review of the IG because the ballot snapshot will be taken and ballot opening in August. So not much time now. So please, anything you want to see in release 1, please raise it now and we can get them in the next few meetings. So thanks everyone. After not making decisions for a few meetings, we made heaps today. So that was an awesome effort. Well done, everyone.
Yeah. Well done, Michael, and good job on the polls on the fly.
That was productive. Thank you.
Good effort, Jess.
Thanks.
Thank you.